What's up, everybody? I'm Stan, and welcome to Detail Comics, where we go over comics in detail. This is Shelf Appeal, the weekly show where I go over the comic books I picked up on Wednesday, give you my impressions, and let you know whether there's something to go back to the shop for or not. What we're going to be doing is starting off with Avengers number 3. So Avengers number 3 by Mark Waid with art by Mug Del Mundo is one of those books where I was kind of like on the fence about it at this point in time. I wasn't really sure what to expect from the storyline, and it's a situation where I was like on the verge of jumping off. However, with Nadia Pym really kind of going back in time, meeting up with these kind of disciples of the time stream that were created out of these monks that were really eradicated as part of this earlier part of the story, it was really a much more interesting book than what I expected. I really liked the portrayal of Nadia, I really liked the portrayal of Herc, and overall things seem to be coming together with Spider-Man not necessarily being written as kind of like offbeat as he was before. It's still not necessarily my favorite book, but it's definitely going to keep me around for the next 2 issues until we finish up this Kang War arc, so it's enough to keep me interested that far. Next, I want to talk about Nova number 2. So Nova number 2 was another book that I wasn't really 100% on, but what really got me this time is that there was about a 2-page interaction between Richard Rider and all the young heroes. So since Richard Rider's been dead since basically the Annihilation Wave and shortly after that, he has no idea what's going on with the universe whatsoever, and it was just a really great man out of time, out of touch moment. And I mean, it was just really funny to see that. The overall kind of scope and scale of Nova's presence. I like the relationship that's building between Richard Rider and Sam Alexander. It's a really interesting comic book. It's not necessarily one that I'm like out there recommending, yelling its praises from the high hills, but it's definitely something that will keep you entertained. And if you like the style of writing, it's kind of funny, quick-witted. It's a little bit light and bouncy. It's a very fun book so far until you start seeing things from Richard's perspective. Overall, definitely a good number 2 issue and stronger than the first. Then there's another book that I wasn't sure about picking up, and that's Harley Quinn number 11. So this is a Frank Cho variant cover, and I mean, I can't really pass up on that, especially when you're talking about bringing the Joker back into the fold. And this is pretty interesting, but the problem is that Joker isn't really in it nearly enough. He's kind of like a setup for a later situation, and it's really establishing a bit more of the relationship between Red Tool and Harley Quinn. And while it was really funny, it really ended up being Harley Quinn versus a tentacle monster, and that didn't end how most people would expect. But what it does is this part of the beginning part of a 2-part series is it kind of gives you an idea where things are going to go, and it really basically ties up with a conflict between Red Tool and the Joker. And it's one of those things where I'm glad that I picked it up to see where things are at, but it's still not necessarily something that's going to make me go back to the well for Harley Quinn anytime soon. Another book that's losing a little momentum for me is Green Lanterns. So in issue number 14, we get really close to the conclusion of the Phantom Ring arc. And what we see is that the Phantom Ring basically becomes a litmus test for Jessica Cruz. She is just so close. She puts it on. She's so scared that she's going to end up something other than Will. And she becomes a Green Lantern, even with the power of the Phantom Ring. So it's just one of those situations where it's just a validation tool for Jessica Cruz. And Simon Baz just doesn't want to put the ring on because he's scared of what might happen, I guess. But there is a pretty inevitable twist that comes at the end of that. It wasn't necessarily telegraphed, but as soon as somebody showed up on the scene, it became very apparent that it's not necessarily who you thought it was. So as far as Green Lanterns goes, it's pretty decent, but it's not necessarily something I'm going to continue picking up after the fact. Another book that's getting kind of close to its end is Green Arrow number 14. So this shows the return of the original Dark Archer in Malcolm Merlyn. And he's the person that's been plaguing Seattle with all these kind of issues, murdering people and framing Oliver Queen for them. And this kind of becomes a very cinematic movie rooftop kind of conflict where Oliver Queen eventually just throws himself in the way of danger to try and save the local PD and earn back a little bit of the trust that he's really lost and has been eroded by Malcolm Merlyn. But it's nice to see his reintroduction as a character into this series. And while I was a little bit waning on this overall, I found that this was a much stronger issue as part of this story arc, so it's definitely going to keep me around for Green Arrow, which has been one of my surprise favorites of DC Rebirth. The next book I want to touch on is kind of a Rebirth issue on its own, and that is Justice League number 12, and as it says right there, Max Lord Rebirth. That's what this issue is all about. And it's really great because Tim Seeley takes this idea of Max Lord, he gives him a very serious backstory, gives you a little bit more development into his character and how he is in DC Rebirth New 52 timelines, and gives him some really weighty kind of stuff that goes along with him. Overall, his father, who was the head of a pharmaceutical company that, had this miracle weight loss drug, but that unfortunately it caused cancer, decided to kill himself, and that really brought out the power and strength and personality of his mother. And his mother was determined to make sure that her son Max was not going to be a weak and a weak person like her husband was. She loved his power, his money, and all that kind of stuff, but she realized what kind of cowardice he hid behind him. So she basically instilled this fear or this this kind of like mantra into Max that if you ever find people unworthy of the power that they have, you should strip it away from them one piece at a time. And that's really the motivating and driving force behind Max Lord. And I find that that really adds a lot of depth to his character. I'm really excited to see where that goes. And as far as Justice League, it makes it much more enticing to pick it up compared to, say, the other runs that have been going on recently. I'd recommend grabbing this one, even if you guys haven't been reading Justice League. Another book that you're really going to want to pick up is Old Man Logan number 16. So Old Man Logan brings back Andrea Sorrentino and his art, and it's just, oh man, this is stellar. Like, it's one of those situations where you're talking about this kind of lost in space horror kind of film matched up with a future imperfect kind of situation, and I'm really excited about where this goes. This book, actually, it made me just want to read the next one right now, because this bouncing back and forth between various realities or time frames, Old Man Logan's perception of where he is off kilter, and the enhancements that go along with the art style are just fantastic. You know, Old Man Logan has been one of the better books out of Marvel for the year of 2016, and this is just starting off 2017 in the right kind of way. As long as Jeff Lemire and Sorrentino are going to be working on this book, it is going to be a must pick up for people that are fans of the Marvel Universe and characters like this. It's just stellar. I was really excited about this book, especially after the small two-parter where they kind of went and fought Dracula and all that kind of stuff. This is a much better return to the previous Old Man Logan arcs before this. The next book I want to talk about is Nightwing number 12. So Nightwing number 12 is a continuation of his Return to Bloodhaven arc, and what we see is we finally see Orca on the scene. And this is Nightwing and the Runoffs, who he's trying to earn the trust of. You know, they're trying to kind of basically save Defacer and Gorilla Grimm from their wrongful accusations. And this is where we start seeing where the heart of the criminal element is inside Bloodhaven. You know, while this arc hasn't been quite as stellar as it could have been, you know, it's not necessarily the strongest, like the Rise of the Raptor arc, you know, the I Am Raptor, all that kind of stuff from the beginning was fantastic. And this just is like, it's reintroducing Dick Grayson to Bloodhaven. I can completely understand that, so it's not going to have that kind of weight and strength that came along with it, but it's still a very competent story that's going forward, and it's really going to be interesting to see how this develops the Dick Grayson Nightwing character. I feel like it's just going to make the conclusion all that much more interesting, and I'm definitely going to be sticking with Nightwing for the foreseeable future. It's highly recommended from me, especially if you're into that particular character. He's a much different take on a Batman kind of persona, and I really like that. However, a book that I liked even more was Moon Knight number 10. So Moon Knight number 10 by Jeff Lemire with art by Greg Smallwood is a standout. It was surprising how much I enjoyed this book. From the moment when we see Mark Spector as a child get introduced to Stephen Grant as a child who looks exactly like himself, and it's just uncanny to see those parallels and those kind of things as he develops his kind of split personality disorder. So the understanding here is that this is the beginning of this situation. This is where he is going to undergo treatment. He's going to possibly sever himself from these particular people, these different personalities that are going along with this. And I'm just super excited to see where Jeff Lemire takes this. I feel like he is not going to just rewrite the Moon Knight origin story. He's going to enhance it and create a lot more context for people that are a fan of the character. It's a really interesting take on this, and it's running in parallel to what's going on in the current modern day times. And as he jumps into like the Overvoid and he ends up, you know, flipping the book around, it's just a really good take on these kind of things. And I was really excited once everything started kind of unraveling in front of me. I'm really excited to see where Moon Knight's going to be going from now. It's one of my favorite books of the year. Another one of the books that I think is really strong is Champions, and Champions number 4 kind of continues that trend. It's not necessarily as politically active as we say like number 1 or number 3 is. You know, some people might be calling those particular books preachy, but it's just really more socially conscious kind of justice acts. This, unlike number 2, which was much more of a team building exercise, this kind of enhances that idea of they still need a leader, and they kind of Mark Waid really builds naturally a progression to having Miss Marvel as the leader by the overall scope of this small issue. So, you know, from the start of it, you have this impression that maybe, you know, 2 people, possibly 3 people have the ability to be a leader of this team, and it slowly becomes 2, and then it slowly becomes 1 by the end of that. And that's by their character's own admission. And it felt very natural, it felt very organic, it felt like that was the way that the team should be progressing, and it leaves really no doubt in my mind that that's how things should be. The interaction with the Atlanteans was kind of like it served its purpose. It wasn't necessarily anything to write home about, but it's definitely interesting to see where things are going to be going from here. I'm not necessarily super duper excited for the next issue because it teases the introduction of Gwenpool into the world of the Champions and possibly as a teammate. I don't necessarily know where that's going to go, but Champions is still a very strong book, and I'm really excited to see where those things go for this team. I'm really excited about the youthful flair and the freshness that this feels. It just feels like a really good book, and I'm excited to see where it goes. Another book I'm really excited about is Justice League vs. Suicide Squad number 3. So, unlike what I expected, this book didn't really just take the Justice League members, put them under Amanda Waller's control, and turn them into a superpowered Suicide Squad. No, this is actually kind of a combination. They're working together, and this is by necessity, not necessarily by force, so that's kind of unexpected on my part. I like the fact that Amanda Waller was anticipating everything happening. You know, she was a very prepared individual, and she always feels like she's in control, and that's one of the strong points about her. She is a bit of a bitch. You know, you can't really deny that, but that's like one of the powerful pieces of her character. And overall, there were some really great moments in this. You know, there's moments with Captain Boomerang. There's a moment when everybody's just kind of like laughing. There's a very Superman moment where he's trying to talk to Killer Frost, and she gives him some backstory. It's a really great development vehicle for Frost in general, you know, for Caitlin Snow, and I'm really excited about that aspect. But it also gave us a little bit of an indication as to who they're really going to be facing and where they came from. So I'm not going to spoil that now, but I'll probably talk about it in the review. But it's definitely a book that I'm really excited about, this whole series, and with how fast things are coming, I'm not wanting for anything. You know, I don't forget about the previous issue, so it makes it easier for me to kind of connect and really latch on and connect these two stories, or this story overall. And I really like that aspect of this. And then we have to talk about one of the big books of the week, and that is Batman number 14. So Batman number 14 is the epilogue for the I Am Suicide arc, and this is all about Bruce Wayne and Selina Kyle. It's all about Batman and Catwoman. And oh my god, if this isn't a love letter to people that want Bruce and Selina to get married, I don't know what it is. It was one of the most, it was a superhero romance that felt so appropriate that I can't think of a better issue that has done this. To be honest with you, I just can't. Because what you get is you get a situation where Selina is no longer going to be killed. You know, the death penalty's off the table. And then it brings into question her actual body count. Because she's like, I killed 237 people. He's like, you didn't. She's like, you don't know I didn't. He's like, I know you didn't. And she's like, you can't prove I didn't. And he's like, well, I will. So it's one of those things where it's just like, did she really kill 237 people? That's all in question now. That's all in play. But then you've got what would be a night out on the town as Batman and Catwoman, not as Bruce and Selina, as Batman and Catwoman. What would that be like? And they kick 15 villains' asses like over the course of 3 pages, and she's just like, you know, she's just chilling as they kind of take these people out left and right. You know, this Clock King's very well carefully placed plans. You know, he's laid out this thing for years, and she just comes in and just bumps him, and it's just like, oh god, this is going to be terrible. And we end with Kite Man, because Kite Man's hell yeah. And it's just, oh god, I love this. And then, you know, it was one of those interesting things because not only were they fighting villains, they were also doing stuff that Selina does. And you just see Bruce, you know, as Batman, just like, I don't like this. You know, this apartment belongs to this particular person. You know, it's like, this is a stolen kind of thing. And Selina's just like, oh god, it's so much fun. You guys have got to read it. I'm going to go over it more in the review, but it is one of my favorite issues of this year just because of the story that was told. It just felt really fun and light, and it was everything that I wanted out of this book. I'm really excited for 14, and I can't wait to see where Tom King takes Batman next. Another book that had me really excited was Superman number 14. And Superman number 14 is in a completely different manner than what I was excited about for Batman. Because what this shows is this is absolute multiversal craziness. So we see the red sun of Superman, you know, kind of coming in. He was looking for some sort of beacon. He could see the light radiating off of Superman, this blue light, which we saw in Superman Annual, so it's tying in continuity. And then what we see are these kind of trans-dimensional beings that are coming to take Superman because he's part of a list and those kind of things. And what we see primarily is the interaction between Red Sun Superman, regular Superman, and then the Justice League Incarnate, which includes another version of Superman as well as other members of the Justice League from across the multiverse. We do get kind of a pretty sad situation at the end of it when Captain Carrot doesn't really make it through this thing alive. So it's just one of those situations where between this and then eventually Superman Reborn in March, there's been no better time to read Superman stories. This is going to be stellar. It just feels good from the start, and then I can't wait to see where this goes into the next series of issues. It just looks like so much fun. I'm really excited about where this arc's going. And while I love this next book, it just wasn't quite enough to edge out Superman as my favorite of the week, and that is Unworthy Thor number 3. So Unworthy Thor is just like, I don't know why Jason Aaron was hiding this story for so long, because this is just everything that I really wanted. You know, you got to get introduced to this hellhound, this beast of a being that is just there, is ready to murder and murder and murder, who Loki named Thori. And it's just so funny, and it's so well placed. The pacing on this is fantastic. It's one of those situations where this book is like the perfect middle ground, because we see a transition for the character. We see him escape his bonds. You know, he has the help of Beta Ray Bill, and they ultimately end up in conflict. You know, the unforgivable sin is his warrior's madness, where he's just driving to get the hammer. And then we see the introduction of Proxima Midnight and Black Swan and Gore, and all these people kind of come together for this battle, and they're like, this is the hammer that we're looking for, and everybody's trying to get the ultimate Thor's hammer, and then Thor shaves off all his hair, and it's just like, it is... Yes, more of this. Give me more of this until we kind of come to the culmination and we start moving back into the regular Thorverse. This is exactly the kind of story that you'd want to tell in order to bring the Odinson back into the fray, and I can't speak highly enough. It's amazing. It's amazing. I love every second of this, and I can't wait to see where issue 4 and 5 go. Now we get on to new titles, and we're going to talk about Justice League of America Rebirth. This is the Adams one-shot issue, and this is all about Ryan Choi. It's nothing but Ryan Choi, and Ryan Choi is surprisingly the man. He is extremely intelligent. He is very forward-thinking when it comes to the situation. You know, it's just like when you're talking about Ray Palmer trusts in him immensely. He's actually the command center for the Atom as he's going across these things, you know, like as he dives into the microverse, and it becomes the responsibility of Ryan Choi to kind of fish the Atom out of the universe that he's stuck in, the microverse. And this is all about how Ryan Choi became that capable individual and how he would kind of feel that responsibility to go after his mentor. And I really like that whole backstory for him. You know, he feels like a very shut-in individual. He's got motives for the right reasons. It's a very well fleshed out character, and that's what I really enjoyed the most about this book. It's definitely a good starting point for the Justice League of America book. If everything's going to have this kind of depth, I'm really excited for where that's going to go. Then we have another Atom, but this is Captain Atom. So the Rise and Fall of Captain Atom number 1 is telling us the story of Captain Atom. And when we find him, it's about 2011, 2012, and he is unstable as hell. So he is having these flare-ups, he has trouble controlling his transmutation powers, and Captain Atom is trying to make it back to his bunker. We see young New 52 Superman, we see Hal Jordan Green Lantern, we see Cyborg, and these guys have to assist him in getting him back to Kansas, where he can be contained. Unfortunately, they don't quite succeed. But what it does is it actually shows him basically kind of not necessarily going Nova himself. It's just he is breaking down on a subatomic level, and to the point where he basically explodes in this containment field, and it causes a rift. And we're not sure if that's a rift in space or it's a rift in time or something along those lines, but it definitely shows a newspaper on the last page with 1994 on it. So this just gives me a really good indication that this is going to be a fantastic book, and I can't wait to see where it's going to go. I was really surprised by this. It's definitely a mini-series, so it's only 6 issues, so it's one that you should probably keep your eye on. Next is a new book from Marvel, and that's the Unstoppable Wasp number 1. So Unstoppable Wasp is interesting. So it's not necessarily a great book by any means. It's just one of those things where there is an overabundance of positivity that comes out of this book. It's very heavy on the girl power. Nadia is written very different than she is in the Avengers. You know, she's a little bit more cold, a little bit more distant for Spider-Man, whereas she's just super accepting, super lovely. You know, she knows everything about Bobby Morse to the point where she makes Bobby Morse cry because it's like, oh my God, I'm not just the woman that beats people with sticks and was married to Hawkeye. I'm so much more than that, and you're the only person that knows. And it's just, the writer is obviously taking his time to flesh out the idea that women are just as capable as men, and that's really probably going to be the prominent feature of this book, at least for the short term. I can't see why that would be wrong, but it's definitely an interesting book. Not necessarily what I'm looking for. I was looking for just a touch more depth, and the only thing that I got from Nadia's character was really one solid page of exposition about the Red Room, and it was more about how she interacts with the world, not necessarily who she is as a person. So hopefully it'll give me a few more of those things over the next couple issues. And then to finish things out, we have U.S. Avengers number 1. So Spider-Man, the Defender of New Hampshire, is the cover that I picked up, and overall, it's a good book. It's not necessarily the best book. It's not necessarily the strongest book, but overall, the interaction between the characters is great. I'm a little bit disappointed that we don't actually have like full-time Everett Ross Hulk. We've got General Maverick, who has a kind of Hulk plug-in, so it gives him about an hour worth of Hulk power every single day and a half, 2 days or so. So basically, they're trying to shut down this secret empire that's kind of coming in with a volcano layer that's on a helicarrier, and it's powered by the magma, and all this kind of crap is going on, and you get introductions to every single character. And with that, you get to know everybody on the team, save for Roberto da Costa. But it's still pretty entertaining. I want to see the team gel more. I understand that you needed to have these kind of FaceTime moments for people that are not necessarily familiar with the characters. And you know what, I really appreciated that, but it kind of broke up the individual pieces, and it didn't necessarily connect to me the way that it should have. I'm going to give this book a few more issues before I decide yay or nay on the pull list, but I like where it's going for now. It seems to be pretty promising. So those are all the books that I picked up this Wednesday, but I want to know what you guys thought, so hit me up in the comments down below and tell me what you grabbed that I didn't grab, or what you thought of the books that I grabbed. I'm more than happy to start that conversation. As always, if you like what you see, hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe right there to get more news, reviews, and commentary on comic books, comic book movies, comic book TV shows and games, and anything and everything inside the world of comics.